All right, I think the recording has started. All right, good evening, brothers. Welcome to the next section of the Grand Lodge of Minnesota webinar series. As you heard me state, we have started this the recording. These are again not tiled meetings, so please govern yourselves accordingly. Keep yourself on mute during the presentation. If you need to unmute temporarily, you can use the space bar. Send any questions to the host via the chat, and we will cover them at the end. We can also, open up the mics and let people talk too if we need to. About 5 minutes-ish or so before the end of the meeting, there will be a poll. Please be sure to submit that poll before you leave. We use that to kind of keep track of popular sessions and see who we want to keep bringing and those kind of things. Well, not again, but here is the upcoming schedule. We do have a re-presentation of the Freemasonry in Decline by Brother Hans, who is actually with us this evening. The Operative Mason Square, and a couple other interesting topics coming up throughout the rest of this month and next month. Again, we are, the Show and Tell Challenge is still in place. This is about, kind of spurring interest, creating content, answering the questions here. If you need more information, there's a website below in the slide. And no further ado, our future presentation this evening, Leo Presentations Made Easy by Worship Brother Andrew. Worship Brother, I am going to stop share and pass the ball off to you. It is all yours.
Fingers crossed that technology will be overcome, and through magic and superstition and smoke and mirrors, we will get my presentation up and running at this momentary time. And of course, that doesn't work that way because science and technology. And it's always embarrassing to me because I've been playing around with IT stuff since the early 80s, since, the Pleistocene, but there's always that little bit of, why isn't this working today? So we'll see about getting my presentation up here. I think what I'm going to need to do, what I've found before for those of you who use Zoom and stuff, sometimes you've got to quit a presentation and then start it all over again. And suddenly it comes up as like, oh yeah, we can share that. So we'll try that again here. And bearing with me, let's see if we can get the screen share. It is not showing up in my screen for some reason. And let me see what we can get now, and then let me know if you all are seeing it. You seeing slides, I hope?
Nope, well, I'm seeing the Zoom.
Yeah. So let me decrease that, minimize that. Hopefully you're seeing it now.
Nope. Still seeing the Zoom part.
Yeah.
You only shared out the browser, so it's not going to let you share out anything else.
Sure why it would be doing that to us.
I don't know.
That's the joys of such things.
Joys of technology, that's for sure.
Yeah. Because some days I've had this happen before. There we go. For those playing at home, hit new share. And then you'll get hopefully everything you're looking for.
There we go. We see slides now.
Well, I want to thank you guys for being here tonight. This is going to be real casual. Just some things that I have discovered as both a lodge education officer and serving as your Grand Lodge education officer that have worked well for me over time. And I hope that there'll be some things tonight that you can say, gee, I haven't done that, haven't tried that, and see how that works for you. And also feel free, I think when we're done, share some of the things you've discovered when you've been putting together presentations. because as we all share this information, the better we collectively are, and our audiences become more wowed with our ability to educate and train. Right off, when we take our installation oath, right there in the manual tells us everything really that we want to know and what we want to see and what is expected of us, helping to guide the lodge through the delightful light of knowledge and concern. That is such a great, succinct description. And it falls upon you as Leos to be able to share that. You'll notice it mentions in here, in this, right out of the manual, it's expected to be a monthly educational program. They also use the word activities, and lays at the end of it, for those who are hopefully listening and not nodding off, cheerfully received and eagerly expected. Someone can hope that they do that too. So what is lodge education? Exactly what you make of it. You'll notice in Minnesota, we don't really say lodge education shall be limited to these topics. I believe it's the Grand Lodge of Virginia. In their installation instructions to their Leos, they limit what things constitute lodge education. We do not, and I think that's one of our strengths. So look around, find the things that interest you, because if you're interested in something and you're enthusiastic about something, that naturally lends itself to discourse and excitement. So by nonverbal communication, often we communicate the interest we have in something, and that gets our brothers interested as well. One of the great things about the craft is we talk about the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and that's going to be a subject one of these days of probably a Minnesota Mason column or columns about the definition, the old definition when those words were used, of what those 7 arts and sciences constituted at that time. But also because you work for, and I will point out parenthetically, you always sit in lodge to the left of the worshipful master to provide the intellectual guidance, just as the chaplain who sits to his right gives us the philosophical guidance, as it were. You listen and talk to him and have conversations, and you'll notice I always ask, what would you like to learn about? Is there something that you think you'd like to have me talk about to help you learn more? And if you got somebody who's interested, maybe they can help you. Oops. There we go. So resources. We are blessed now with the interweb. God bless the net. Starting off and asking questions, looking there will give you a plethora of resources now. The things we have available to us now versus what we had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, is jaw-dropping. Yeah, there's some anti-Masonic sites out there, and they start off and they sound, but you all are smart people. You can sit there and think, this site is not. And there's also things, if you're doing stuff like, for example, the Golden Ratio talk that I did. I wound up going to some real interesting non-Masonic websites to get my information. So really, a lot of times, besides delving into a personal library, you have a planetary library that you have available to you. And don't hesitate. Well, I was told, the internet's not reliable. Well, come on, we're giving talks, we're educating. This is not something you're submitting for a master's or doctoral thesis. Some of the organizations have incredible web presence. The Philalethes Society, Quattro Coronati Lodge, I might add that all of these also have publications, the first three. Masonic Society, and they have a very, very active web forums where a lot of great discussion goes on. Pietra Stones is there. It doesn't look like it's been active with new content, but it has content that is phenomenal. And from there, you can find links to other writings. Several of the Grand Lodges around the world have some excellent. California, British Columbia, Yukon, several of the Australian Grand Lodges. They're a little bit like the US. There's no Grand Lodge of Australia. There are individual Australian state Grand Lodges, and they have some great education. Of course, UGLE, you can find some really fascinating places to go down and look around. Our own Grand Lodge website. And I'm going to try something here. Tonight, we're going to try a little something different. I'm going to exit out of this, show you exactly where that link that I've posted here goes to on the Grand Lodge site, and show you how to get down and go into places like the Short Talk Bulletins, Leo Bulletins, 357 essays, and our Grand Lodge Google Drive. So let's see if we can do this. I'm looking to see if it will let me escape. And we're going to terminate the show for a moment right there. And hopefully you're all still seeing my screen.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, there we go. So this is where the link takes you. And you can see highlighted here, Masonic Education Resources.
Oh, well, we don't see the web browser itself. No.
Oh,
we see the slideshow. Sorry.
Okay, okay. This was an experiment tonight to see if I could show you what I'm seeing here. That's okay. These things happen. Let's go back to the site. I will tell you by clicking on that link, you get to the member resources pages. There is highlighted Masonic education resources, and you'll see things for like the Wayfaring Man, Masonic Light, Leo resource pages, and down at the bottom of the 8 is Files Archive. That will take you to our Google Drives, and that's where you find collected 357s and a number of the other excellent talks that we have. There is years of incredible stuff in there. Just all fascinating. And of course, if you're like me, you've got a lot of books and various things sitting at home waiting to be mined for ideas. To be honest with you, sometimes when I'm sitting there looking at a deadline coming up and I'm going, what am I going to write about this month? What am I going to write about? And I will pick up my copy of Coil, which I prefer over Mackie, or even Mackie, and I'll just randomly open a page and start looking and paging through until I find something that goes, hey, that looks interesting. Why don't I write about that? So there's a lot of different places you can go without diving deep. And now if you are very lucky, you have an individual lodge library or access to a larger library that also has physical books available to you. I want to talk a little bit about presentation. So you've gotten materials together, you've built a slideshow, it's time to talk. We all want to absolutely avoid death by PowerPoint. I will point out, you are not required to be the last one on. We meet in the evenings. People have busy days. It's getting towards bedtime. It's getting towards time you want to be with your family. And that's when you get can you be faster? Can you be funnier? Can we be done? Look, several lodges I know actually put the Leo on first thing. While everybody's fresh and they're there, And I can't emphasize enough practicing just a little bit. I mean, depending on your experience and comfort with public speaking, sometimes you just need to look at your notes a little bit. Some of you need more time. That's fine. We're all different. You all probably as Leos know how you best prepare. The other thing is activities. Remember what it said. You can do talks, but you can also do activities. Practice things. You can do the welcoming of the Grand Master. You could practice a Masonic funeral, have people up, walking around, doing things, even though it's limited only to Grand Lodge. One of the fun things that can be done, why don't you do an entire cornerstone laying ceremony so you can see how they work and how it works and how it goes. That might be kind of a fun thing. And people are up and they're active and their blood is flowing and therefore they're more engaged. Other things you can think of is if you have a lodge education committee or would like to form one, you have many newly raised brothers. You might have a brother or two who don't want to enter the line just now. They are young, they have jobs, they have various things going on, but they want to help. They want to do something. Say, hey, how would you like to help me putting on lodge education? They can do some little things. You can talk to them about stuff. Maybe there was something that they were really interested in, wanting to find out more when they went through their degrees, and it's still fresh in their mind. Work, help, guide, and let them put on one. Masonic Jeopardy is big now. There's several websites where you can download the material. Just Google, speaking of using the internet, Masonic Jeopardy. We do have a Minnesota Masonic Speakers Bureau. We've been promoting that. They used to go out. Hopefully we're starting to get a few now to come in and do these presentations, but have PowerPoint and they're happy to travel. So it doesn't always have to be you as the Leo doing the speaking. It is incumbent upon you as the Leo to arrange some Masonic education, but it doesn't have to be all you. Find some willing volunteers. Speaking of death by PowerPoint, I don't know how many are familiar with the 10, 20, 30 rule. No more than 10 slides, which by the way, I'm violating here tonight. No more than 20 minutes and use 30 point when you're putting up your slides. That keeps you from crowding a slide too deeply. Don't forget the 2 B's of public speaking. Be brief and be gone. You don't want to be that guy who overstays his welcome in front of the master. Can't speak enough when you're speaking publicly or just like tonight. Plan B for when equipment issues arise, because they will. Slide by the word for word slide, that will lead to somnambulance very quickly unless these are really salient points you're using later to emphasize the old idea of tell them what you're going to teach them, tell them what you just taught them. And always eye contact, and if you can, move away from your point of broadcast, your computer, for example, and move around the room. People follow you as you move, as you talk, as you present, and it helps keep them kinetically connected to what you're doing. And finally, like we all say, we're all in this together. I can't emphasize it enough. One of the things I did once that proved to be very interesting in my lodge is I started inviting brothers to get up and briefly tell everyone what their job was and what's the one thing about their job that people don't know about that they find fascinating. And that was a way for us through lodge education to get to know each other better as members of a lodge. You got to like that. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, some of the ways to do lodge presentation. It's by no means comprehensive, and I don't intend it to be, because each of us develops his own style and his own way of presenting. What we're trying to move away from is two things. In many lodges around this country, the Leo job is an honorific. They've given it to a highly experienced brother in the lodge who may not be the best person to present education. And he gets his Masonic Service Association 3, 5, and 7 bulletin. He opens it up and he starts reading it in a monotone. That's not lodge education to me. They're great, and you can excerpt parts from it. You can even read it if you're a really good oral presenter. But what we're looking to do is to add more content. One of the things that is very important for every Leo to recognize is that our new waves of Masons are hungering for knowledge. They're hungering for all the stuff that a lot of us never got, because our lodges were oriented on the next pancake breakfast, the next fundraiser, the next softball game, this and that. And at that point, we were not, as a craft, really presenting some of the fascinating aspects of the 7 liberal arts and sciences and the philosophies and all these other things that a lot of young people now, young men, are saying, you know, I never got that stuff. Well, here's our chance to convey some of the fundamental aspects, intellectual aspects of Masonry. And with that, I'm going to exit and turn this back over, and we can have some lively discussion, I hope.
Well, thank you, Worshipful Brother. Brethren, please, if you have questions, now is the time to go ahead and unmute yourself, and please go ahead and ask questions.
Well, comments, denunciations?
I will add that on those short talk bulletin items coming from the MSA, there is and I don't know how many of you are, doing a lot of podcasts, but they are now supported via the Grand Lodge of Minnesota. Those are being broadcast via podcast, where they are taking various articles out of the 100 and how many years? I don't know. It's not 100 years. It's quite a long time. I think 1928 or something like that. I don't know.
We're closing in on
100. Yes. Years worth of articles for that, and they are broadcasting them via podcast. And I find myself listening to those on a regular basis, so they're good pieces of information.
If any of you guys have drives, and one of the things as a Leo, I get a lot of inspiration from listening to podcasts, Masonic podcasts. The MSA, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'd totally forgotten to bring that up. There's also others like Masonic Roundtable, Midnight Freemason, great discussions. Sometimes it's stuff, it's kind of like, yeah, okay. And other stuff like, wow, I didn't know that. I was listening to one the other day and came up with something I'm going to look into, and it goes to a lot of the still commonly repeated mythologies that are repeated by anti-Masons. And its origins back in the late 19th century. So, yeah.
So there was a question posted in the chat. Which subjects seem to be the most interested to the newer members in lodge education?
I can't speak for other lodges. And I'd love to hear from you guys on what you found. I found one that I did, and this can be emulated by almost any lodge, is I found the name of one of the early founders of my home lodge. Ionic 186 in Duluth. There's a very long highway named after him. He was actually one of the original founders of the city of Duluth and one of the earliest Freemasons in Duluth. So I wove into his biography a brief history of Masonry in Duluth and a history of our lodge. And a lot of guys found that fascinating. The other ones are, well, for example, you've seen some of them. I did originally Gettysburg at Duluth for my lodge, and that has been one of the most well-received ones I've done. There's other ones you can do. Some of the ones that I have done without use of PowerPoint, I did a series of monthly Leo presentations on some of the finer aspects of each officer in the lodge. We had folks who didn't understand why their staff was inclined at 22.5 degrees. Little things like that. And it helped the new members really get a sense of what each lodge officer did. And it gives you content for several months.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the things I did. What have you guys found have gotten good responses?
Well, let me weigh in here. As Andy, as you know, I do a lot of candidate education. And what I found is that there is a very distinct interest in the esoteric as of lately, or not as of lately, but certainly over the last couple of years. There is a desire to learn more about the ancient philosophies that are, in essence, presented through Masonry. And here's the key: how they apply to today's life. Really, what does it mean to me to be a Mason, and how do I apply this in a life that is very complex, that is very demanding, and that's where an explanation, a philosophical explanation of the working tools and the philosophies are really greeted well by those candidates. And so, for instance, I with my groups, I veer off into some psychological topics. Or, as of lately, we're exploring still the tools, but expand beyond that, but with an emphasis on how do you apply this in daily life, and particularly in this day and age. So I would say the vast majority of candidates coming in have a distinct desire to learn more about that.
I would agree with that topic. I think that is, that and the history of the lodge itself and Freemasonry is also a useful topic from the survey we did for the webinar stuff. That was one of those higher ranked items. Brother Paul does have a question here that do any speakers do presentation on men's issues from medical or psychological, like depression?
I have to go back and take a look at everybody's content. But I want to say yes, but it's one of those things we are beginning to break down some generational societal barriers that were inculcated in previous generations about not talking about these things. Mm-hmm. And I think more and more, and we do of course have our past Grand Master who has been very involved with those items. And I think John would be more than happy to go and talk just about anywhere about that stuff.
There was a program that he had a session during his Grand Lodge year, and I don't remember the name of the company. I probably the wrong term, but who that group was that he brought in.
It's a nonprofit, and I'm blanking on the name myself. But yeah, the answer is yes. It takes a little work to find, but we can help you find it. I think that would be a great thing that you could present in virtual lodge, because it's certainly not a tiled topic. Mm-hmm. And get some folks maybe, and if you reach even one.
And there's very few, and we all know what those restrictions are on topics that you can bring in to have from a from a lodge education perspective, right? It's kind of open to what the master wants to present to the lodge, right? You,
Yes.
as a Leo, you work with the master to see what his focus is, and you help drive the educational side of that agenda, so to speak. So.
Absolutely.
And further to what Paul's question was, I tried, everybody familiar with the Johari model? Basically the 4 squares where what you know about yourself, what others know about you and you don't know about yourself, what you share with others, and then your inner secrets, right? And I call it jokingly the Masonic Johari model. And I place it in a Masonic context, and that leads to really fascinating discussions where through that venue, and I think that speaks to Andrew's earlier point, is that you need to create a platform through which you mediate content towards candidates, towards lodge members, but it should facilitate discussion, because I think one of the most important aspects in around Leo presentation is have or establish a dialogue. It is not a one-way direction. The most fascinating and the most binding experience is where you were part of the experience. And I think as a Leo, if you can facilitate that by having these members weighing in or into the discussion, into the topic, and soliciting that, you get a much stronger, how should I say, experience out of that whole lodge education. And in this particular context of Johari Masonry, it doesn't exist. We made this just up. But topics of how people feel about themselves and in the context of Masonry percolate up, and they're picked up by other members in the form of a discussion, or it's just fascinating. It goes quickly outside maybe the specific realm of Masonic history, Masonic content, but it's a most gratifying experience for the participant itself.
So, Brother Adam has a topic or another source he wants to point out for Southern California Research Lodge.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for bringing that up. Great lodge. Oh man, you can mine their stuff forever, and just your withered dead corpse will be found on their webpage because you've just found something else to read and go through. They're great. Been there, done that. Down that rabbit hole. And speaking of rabbit holes, don't be afraid to start researching one thing and find something else more fascinating and start researching that. I think that's for me, that's one of the great joys of Masonic education is you can start looking at one thing and through that find something else that has captured your fancy, and you'll go down there and delve into all of that. That's absolutely, yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
So I also have a question here in the chat from Brother Paulman. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. I'm not sure what you're asking. If you want to just unmute and ask your question, please. I'm not sure I'm following the chat exactly.
Well, seems to me, if we're taking into account this limiting education of California, there was very long and rich education for officers this season. I have participated there. There was 15 or 16 training sessions. But the general question is, according to brothers in our Grand Lodge, is what we are doing at the moment. We have all regular style of doing our job, which you know perfectly on the basis of our bylaw. But now the situation is completely different.
Can you move a little bit closer to the microphone?
But now the situation is completely different. It's everything was changed. if you look carefully about the decision given by Prime Minister of England, people could be assembled not more than 6. If there should be a assembly or meetings with more than 6 people, it's against the law. But with 6 people or 6 brothers or 6 officers, we have not had chance to do any normal job following our bylaws. And the young brothers are asking old brothers, and they are looking for training or education, how we shall continue to do our job in this situation. There was no limitation, there was no promises. We just planning that there should be in the near future chance to return back to our old style of doing our job. And nobody's answer. I'm completely agree with the proposal of Brother Andrew regarding Plan B. Which is our Plan B for continuing our work?
You know, and that's really, I think you bring up a very excellent point, and this is facing us around the world. And I'm not sure if you're here in Minnesota or if you're from elsewhere, but I know from listening to Zoom lectures from Masons from around the world, everybody, every nation seems to be facing this and in that situation that you're faced. And for us, and I got to hand it to the mentoring committee and the leadership committee, they jumped very quickly to establish the Zoom meeting model of presenting some incredible training and education and all sorts of topics to reach brethren when we can't meet in lodge assembled. Just like, you know, you say you're limited to 6. We're not so limited, but this is an incredible avenue of sending out more information to more Masons in more locations. It's been a serendipitous breaking of the old role model that we had to do things by force of circumstances, and I think it's been a great thing. I've been very encouraged to see that we're now, I'm reaching far more Masons than I was reaching before in just going to a lodge, although sometimes they were very well attended. So brother, I think you're right. The Plan B, at least here, has been to move more and more to what we can do outside of a tiled lodge. And certainly Masonic education, a lot of it can be done outside of a tiled lodge. Now, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, Worshipful Brother. If there isn't any other questions, I am going to steal back the presentation part and pop back over here. Where did it go now? There it is. Okay. Again, the upcoming webinar sessions, as we spoke about in the beginning. And again, there was the poll that was open. Please be sure to submit that before you go. I am going to stop the presentation here and stop the recording. And